Hey now, it's Dan Aberhart here, and welcome to the Growing the Future podcast, where we like to talk to folks who want to innovate and collaborate and transform the agricultural industry. Thanks so much for joining us for season 6, episode 4. Today's guest I had the pleasure of spending some time with recently overseas. We'll get into that story, but I've been watching his progress in a very excited fashion. His agronomy company has really scaled and grown, and they're doing research and development and working with their customers in really fascinating ways. So I'm interested both in the journey of entrepreneurship, but also the story of agronomy and all the wonderful things that this individual is doing with his team and his customers. So we'll get to that. But before I introduce today's esteemed guest, I'd like to remind you to please check out the Aberhart family of companies online, starting with aberhartfarms.com, where we grow food to feed the world in Landsberg, Saskatchewan. Suregrowth.ca, where we offer precision agronomy consulting services. Convergencegrowth.com, where we accelerate solutions across food, health, and agriculture. And of course, AberhartAgSolutions.ca, where we deliver one of a kind fertility solutions of the future to your farm. And you can get notified about all of our new episodes by signing up for our newsletter at growingthefuturepodcast.ca. My next guest was raised on a mixed cattle and grain farm outside of La Flèche in south central Saskatchewan, but he does have roots in France, where we'll talk about the history. He returned to his roots recently. He now resides on an acreage southwest of Plenty, where he's planning on building a new office for his agronomy business. So he's on an acreage southwest of Plenty with his wife and co-owner Shannon, and their 3 beautiful daughters, Elliot, Olivia, and Emma. And he graduated from the University of Saskatchewan with a degree in ag business and is a practicing agrologist with the Saskatchewan Institute of Agrologists. He has got a wealth of knowledge gained through roles in grain marketing, sales, and agronomy, over 15 years working in the agricultural industry. And he loves to work closely with his farmers, his customers, to find the best solutions to maximize not only yield, but most importantly, the profitability of their farming operations. With this goal in mind, his company MaxAg was established in 2019 to fully commit to these goals. A lot has happened since. We're going to talk about that. He loves using the latest and applied technologies available to help make the best decisions possible. Today, I want to talk about his entrepreneurial journey, which I thought was really interesting, some of the twists and turns. We're going to talk about scaling his company. We're going to talk about how he works with his customers, his method of doing research. He's the ultimate skeptic. His motto is "It depends."
Think that's every agronomist you ever talk to. We're a really exciting bunch.
He's exceptionally non-committal as far as agronomists go, if you can actually believe that. And we were recently overseas together, as I alluded to, so that's going to be really fun to talk about. So please, welcome to the show. Golf clap, whether you're in your truck or your office or your cab or your equipment or whatever. Slow golf clap here from Mike Palmier. Mike from Max Ag Consulting. We could call it Mike Ag Consulting too, I guess, but it's really about the team, isn't it, Mike?
It is about the team. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Dan. I really appreciate it. Again, very long-winded intro. You do a really good job of that. So
Well, I'm working on my wind. I'm trying to improve my wind all the time. My wind keeps getting better. But I guess going back to when I first met you, I saw you at a seminar for farmers. I forget which town that was, but you were speaking to
God's land. Yeah, that was in
God's
God's land.
Land. Yeah, at one of our dealers. And so ever since then, I wanted to collaborate with you, and I was really looking forward to this conversation. So I guess one of the things I've always been most curious about most agronomists, but specifically you, because you had an interesting journey to become an agronomist. When did you realize that you were somebody that could sell your advice for money to farmers? When did that occur to you?
It took a long time, right? I mean, everybody seems to have a different length of journey and whatnot, but it took me a long time to realize that, hey, I actually maybe have some value out here. And a large part of that reason is, so I have a degree in ag business. I had mentioned to you, I was always in sales roles. So I'd worked with a number of different companies, always in sales roles. And just over time, working with farmers and my customers and everything like that, kept on getting drawn more and more and more into the field and working very closely with them. I had opportunities to, move into different types of roles where I would be out of the field and not working as closely with, farmers. And it was never something that overly interested me. because what I really like about what we do is just being able to help people. Um, that's really what the bottom line is, and to be able to help people in our rural communities and whatnot. So it took a long time because it was probably, well, so I started this in October of 2019. It was maybe a year before that where it even entered my mind. It might have only been 6 months before that. And I've been in the business since 2008. So that's 11 years. So I see some people that are in the business, say working as a retail agronomist for 2 years, and then they go on their own. I'm like, wow, like they understand themselves a lot better than what maybe I did initially. It took me a long time to get here.
But you move so fast. So when you got into it in the last 4 years, we talked about your size, the scale of your company. What do you think is the difference that has allowed you to really scale the company, build a team, um, get more acres, work with more customers? What's going on under that noggin there?
Yeah, I guess I would say probably there's a number of things that just worked out. I would like to say that they were all planned, but they weren't. So when I moved down to this area, so my wife is from this area, and that's what led me to being in that Plenty Dodds Land area. I actually worked as a sales rep for a chemical manufacturing company. And so with that, I was dealing with all sorts of farms in a large area within the area that I live now. So I gained all these contacts, right? And I always tried to work really closely with them. I like being in the field. I like being in the trenches with these guys. And so with that, I had a lot of contacts. Then when I went back to retail after a couple of years of doing that, then I started diving more and more and more into agronomy and getting really deep into the agronomy world, especially with fertility, and developed a whole new customer base for that retail in a specific area. And that's where I launched Max Ag Consulting, was with that customer base that I built, just because I saw that there was an opportunity to be more proactive with these customers and less reactive, which is generally the case that I've found with retail. It's just there's so many other things going on that it's hard to be proactive with all of the customers. And so as soon as I started my business, well, I had all these contacts for this huge area within West Central Saskatchewan. I had really good relationships with a core group of customers in a specific area that I could initially build on. And honestly, I was a bit shocked by the demand, I would say, over anything else. I I like to laugh because I had a 5-year business plan that I drew up when I started this. And in year 5, it was me and a summer student, right? And now we're just getting into year 5, and there's 10 full-time people and 3 summer students. So I'd like to say it was all planned, but it wasn't. It was okay, let's just wait and see what happens and see what the response is to what we're offering.
One thing that always fascinated me about you was your ability to use big words. And you actually didn't start out as an agronomist. You didn't come out of the womb as an agronomist. You actually got some training to be a journalist. Do you think that's had an impact on your thinking?
I I think I think just having different experiences through my life has had an impact. I grew up on a farm. I went into journalism. Uh, did that for a couple of years. Took some French courses, and that's why I was just so fluent when we went, which I'm sure you've noticed and
You
commented on
were
lots.
a great
Yeah,
orderer of croissants.
exactly. Just really good at that. Um, did some different things, seen some different areas, right? And then I took a year off after that journalism stint, I guess you could call it, just because it wasn't something that I thought was a really good fit for me. Went back to the farm, worked at a local seed grower near home, and got into the agriculture side. So I think the journalism thing was, I mean, the reason why I went into journalism is I was always told I had to do something. I had to go into some sort of post-secondary education. I couldn't just work and figure things out. And I always liked sports. I always liked writing. I've been an avid reader my whole life. So all of those types of things do benefit me right now, right? So with the sports, I mean, main reason I was into sports is I've always been a numbers guy and really big into math and statistics, right? Which I use now. On the reading and being an avid reader and getting into the journalism side and really learning how to write. Now I think that helps me even to converse with people and write some very long-winded emails, which I'm known for within the company.
Which could be
And
blogs or maybe a novel.
it could be. It could be. I just need to eke out a bit more time. Absolutely. And so then all of a sudden I'm in Saskatoon, I'm in the ag business and I'm taking business courses and I was in sales. And when I was even in sales, I worked in many different areas. Like I worked up at Tisdale for a little while, out at Clevet, Lloydminster. I was in the Peace. I was at North Battleford. I worked in all these different areas and met all these different farms, and all of their farming practices were different because of their history, who's influenced them, the weather conditions, all sorts of things. And so I think all of that has, in a convoluted roundabout way, led me to, this stage of my life where, we are here for long term. And have maybe different viewpoints than what, some people that have maybe even just went to university as an agronomist and went back home to the same area.
Well, I think that's what really appealed to me about you, is you seem like a real thinker. And then as I got to know you, one of the things that you shared with me over and over was a theme about having a mission to significantly influence crop production and farm profitability in West Central Saskatchewan. And I personally think you should expand that eventually one day to Western Canada as you build systems. Maybe North America, maybe the world. Um, maybe you'll be doing it in
World
France.
domination with Dan Aberhart. Yeah.
You can go and speak at town halls in France and say, it depends. It depends. If that's proper French. If it's not proper French, I forgive all the French people that are listening to this. But tell me about that mission, why you want to change things or improve things, I guess. What's your thoughts on that?
So in all these different areas that I've worked in, I've found that there are specific areas that are maybe more progressive and other ones are more conservative. And the common theme that I've found with that is a lot of it depends on who in that area was the influencers and who was
Right.
pushing their customers and the farmers in that area out of their comfort zone to do better, right? And so at the end of the day, with this business, I mean, yes, I could run a business and do consulting and work with guys and do the same old stuff and, do fine and make a living. But at really what I'm interested in is making a big, large difference. Um, the way to do that is to be able to really dive in head first, push guys out of their comfort zone, try lots of new things, and be an influencer within the area. Another thing that I always think about, I mean, I've grown up and lived in small towns for the majority of my life, is if you want to have an impact economically and long term in a small town, what better way to do that than work in agriculture and grow crops and increase the profitability with our farmers, who are then going to reinvest those dollars within our community, bring in other businesses. I hire employees, they build houses or buy houses, they have kids, they go to schools. Like, it's all that money just cycles in small town Saskatchewan. And that's important, right? I don't, I think about this a lot. Like, I don't want my money going to a large corporation down in the States. I want my money to cycle within my own community.
So that's why you're building a Max Ag Consulting headquarters that's going to be larger than the town of Plenty of 120. A
That's
sprawling
maybe
complex, like
a gross exaggeration is what that is, but
with an open cafeteria and foosball tables.
well, speaking of foosball, I was telling my girls, because Dan and I played foosball in France and in Paris at a hotel, and he was talking himself up like he was a big time foosball player, and man, he was not. I think my 8-year-old girl provides a better match than you do, Dan.
Well, I think it was because we were playing French foosball. If we were to play American foosball, it would be a very different tale of the tape. So I welcome you to that challenge somewhere on, American soil. We'll do it again. We'll see what happens.
Okay, it's
I
on.
basically like French foosball in my mind doesn't even count. Like, it's a whole different. I'm not. That was my first, well, second exposition to that culture. But you trained in the way of the French arts there. So, but yeah, you're talking about giving back to the community and fostering employment and all that stuff. You recently brought some folks over from Ukraine. They were getting
I
here just
did.
as we were returning.
Yeah, absolutely. So they arrived, I guess they arrived at the house that we had lined up for them to rent in Luceland, which is northwest of Dodsland. And they arrived there on last Wednesday, I guess. So that was towards the end of March. And So I spent some time with them. It's a big culture shock, right? The language is one thing, but how everything's set up. How do you get your driver's license? How do you get a health card? How do you set up utilities? All these different words that aren't necessarily in a dictionary or a translation app. So it's been really interesting doing that. But I guess what I think about it is how much they appreciate being here. And that's what's really neat. I mean, we take for granted what we have here. But when you see somebody come over from another environment and they just really, really appreciate what we have and the things that we say we've tried to do for them as Max Ag to make their lives easier. And it just gives you a different perspective on the world, which is really important.
Well, that's huge, especially coming from their circumstances. Safety, and having the lights on would just be primary. So yeah, it makes us all grateful. I'm curious about scaling because you become a little bit of an HR company as well as an agronomy company as well as all the other things. So
Mhm.
you said your business plan had you and and a summer student. I don't know if you had a picture of the summer student as a stick person in your business plan, and then all of a sudden it's like a real. But when you first started hiring, and then you developed more people on the team, what's your philosophy to hiring and firing and encouraging people in a leadership setting?
Luckily enough, I haven't had the displeasure of firing anybody yet. It's worked out so far for us. So I
That's
can't really
amazing.
speak to that too much. I mean, really, I'm less focused on immediate knowledge as I am more focused on the ability of those people to be creative and their intentions and what they want to do and the kind of their inner goals. Because I think that's really important, right? I mean, we need to be motivated. We're in the field by ourselves a lot, which is the crop. And sometimes, say, a large canola crop, you're trying to go through and you're looking for Bertha armyworms and diamondback moss, and you're thinking, why am I here? This doesn't make any sense. So like that internal motivation, I think, is really important. Um, Obviously, living in West Central Saskatchewan, it's a challenge at times to be able to hire people out here. There's only so many people that live here, and so bringing people in from other areas is important. And I would just think on our end, it's just being creative with who we hire and how we hire them. Um, say I have a coworker who has no background on a farm, has a degree in biology, a master's in bioinformatics, has done a bunch of computer programming, is really interested in plants, but has all these different vast experiences, and we can use that. Let's figure it out. So it's been really neat that way as we're building up our team. And again, I could say that it was strategic, but again, it's not really. I think there's so many things that we've just been fortunate on. Within our team, we have a lot of somewhat similar personalities, a lot of introverts, which just comes with the realm of agronomy in my mind. But they all have their niches and they all have their parts of agronomy that they like better than others. And so that's what's going to be really neat going forward in the next few years is to be able to what I would call almost exploit those niches, right? And be able to, it's kind of like the 80-20 rule. Spend 80% of your time on the things that you like, right? I mean, that's what we want to try to focus on over time. So again, strategy, not really. I would confess that probably the last 5 years or 4.5 years, I've been just basically running the entire time. But so far it's worked out. And now we have the ability as we hire more people and expand the business that now I can bring on more support people to help. It's not just agronomists. Now we have, an agronomy manager and different people within the team that can support others and the rest of the team members. And that's really important because it can't be all on me to be able to manage and support the team. There's just too many things going on.
I'm glad you mentioned the
I'm glad.
80-20 rule because frankly, I wasn't sure that you were listening at all in France. I was hoping that you were learning something as we went. But is that the one characteristic that you would instill in your staff if you could is creativity, or is it curiosity, or is it work ethic, or what's the biggest thing?
Well, yeah, I think curiosity is big. It's always shocking and surprising to me actually how little curiosity that it seems like we have in the world. Because I also think what that does is breed skepticism on our sides, which is important, right? We've talked a lot about that, Dan. Um, and being able to have a critical viewpoint on what makes sense for our customers, whether it be a specific agronomic practice or a product or whatnot, right? Um, So that curiosity is a big thing because we need to understand the system, not just A plus B equals C. And it rarely works like that. The agriculture and agronomy systems that we have are so interdependent that to not be curious, I think, is a fatal flaw, and really been able to see your full potential in this business.
That's a big part of what I see, being activated in your business is curiosity, because another thing that fascinated me about you is that you've drilled down on some really kind of oddball areas of research. And here's this guy talking incessantly, with passion about stubble and moisture and stuff. And it's a small thing, but I thought it was actually highly functional and must be really rewarding to talk to producers about something that really doesn't, like, it's not an X9 combine and it's not, a drone or something sexy, but it has an impact. The ROI is probably significant, and it's kind of common sense. But when you put it into data, it's just like, hey, you're uncovering what was your Higgs and boson principle there, Friggs and Roy's scenario.
Dunning-Kruger effect, is that the one
Oh,
you're
Dunning
referring
Kruger, yeah, Dunning
to? I
Kruger.
completely butcher that today.
Do you want to explain what that is to me again? Because I never did pick it up, obviously. And then how it
Right.
seems to apply, you apply it to these weird little sectors of reality that nobody else has really cared to look at, frankly.
The Dunning-Kruger effect, I think, is actually really important. And I learned about it in university at some point in time. And it just speaks to me because I've been in those situations, and being self-aware is also very, very important in everyday life for everybody. And so the Dunning-Kruger basically says that initially when you start learning something, let's say you start learning about agronomy and you learn that the plant needs nitrogen. Great. Now I'm going to put nitrogen on the soil or in the soil for this plant. I know absolutely everything, right? It's like right off the bat, you know very small amounts, but you're overconfident. That's the idea with that. Then as you learn more and more and more, you get less and less and less complicated because you realize how confusing and complicated that whole fertility system, Mulder's law, Liebig's barrel, all those types of things can be, right? The more you dive in, the less you honestly know. And then you reach a point where you've basically hit the bottom, right? You're not confident about anything because you've learned so much that you have enough knowledge built up to realize how complicated and confusing these systems can be at times. Then you start going up the confidence scale again, right? Because I know you're starting to test these theories. So I think that those types of effects and theories and all those types of things are really important for us to be aware of, because every single one of us is human and we all do the exact same thing when it comes to this. It's human nature. Um, so that's why I do talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, because I do see it a lot.
I feel like you've applied it in your research in the way that you take a really simple thing and you would assume that you know everything there is to know about, well, stubble catches moisture, duh. But it's like the more that you look into it, the more nuanced it is and the more interesting points there are about it.
You could just say, well, that's just one variable. Increase your stubble, catch more snow, and off you go. Right? You make more money, and that's great. But how tall a stubble should you leave? How does that affect abiotic stresses like the amount of sunlight that plant receives, wind stresses, that kind of stuff? How can our seeding implements be able to seed effectively into taller stubble? There's just so many interactions and interdependent variables within our cropping systems that you can't think that, okay, I've got this one variable and all we have to do is change that and we're rich. It affects everything else over time, right? And again, too, you catch more snow because you have taller stubble. That will give you a different effect and a different yield increase on your crop if it's dry going into winter versus if it's wet going into winter, right? Because there's more or less ability for that soil to be able to take in water through snowmelt and infiltrate. So we've just been, I guess you could call it, unfortunate enough that we've been so dry the last few years that we're able to play with these types of things and see these variables in the field, and they have a huge effect on our overall crop because we haven't had the conditions in season to be able to fully where moisture is not a limiting factor.
Well, on the subject of just changing one variable to get rich, my dad always said, marry a nurse, which obviously I didn't.
I did. So yeah, that's good.
Proud of you, bro.
Yeah, thank you.
You done good. So when it comes to the research, I provided you guys a really brilliant name for the company, which you didn't use, by the way. Publicly, you basically said no, thank you. But you did. Someone else gave you a name for it. What is the name of it? And give us the vision of what that research and development company is going to look like.
Yeah, so as we went along with this and as the research, like the field scale research program grew, we decided that it would be a good idea to give it a name. And we don't have a lot of marketers on staff. And I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about catchy names and whatnot. I'm just trying to focus on the business. And so we threw out a Twitter poll just to have different ideas, right? Throw something at us. Maybe it'll even be our muse and we can come up with some names just based off of this. And so I saw yours. I mean, it wasn't very good, but we considered it. Um,
It was a
and,
unanimous thumbs down. There was 10 thumbs down on my.
Dan,
I'm
you're
a
great.
marketer, but for a living, like I take this very personally. I'm just
That's,
kidding. Uh,
I'm kidding
I'm
too.
happy for the other person that won. I really am.
Yeah. So, anyways, the name is Max Insight, so might as well cut to the chase. And there was another agronomist that I have met and talked to through some of the networks that we're involved in, as he's an agronomist in Ontario. And so the whole premise of this was that if it was somebody's choice or somebody's suggestion within West Central Saskatchewan, that we're going to donate $1,000 to a nonprofit or an organization of their choice. If it was from somebody out of our area, then we would donate $500 to what their choice would be and keep the 500 still close to home, right? Because I really value that. And he was nice enough that he said, keep the money local, right? So he obviously thinks the way that I do, which is great. Put the $1,000 in your local community, which is what we did. So that was fun. That was a neat thing to do, and we came up with Max Insights, which I'm not sure where the Max came from, but it's really catchy.
Very original. I wish I thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now at least we can call it something. Before that, we were calling it large scale research program on farm research trial network. It was all over the place. So now it's just Max Insights, and it's just a name of the R&D group that we're building that's under the Max Ag umbrella.
What is that going to look like?
Well, it's evolving all the time, it seems like. Because we've had a good amount of demand, and a lot of it is, I guess there's a few different things that we do in trial, right? We trial some of our ideas as a group and as agronomists. We trial some of what our customers and our farmers are pushing up, but also we want to make sure that we're on the forefront of some trends that are coming down the pipe, technologies that are coming down the pipe, specific products potentially, and be able to test those and even do long-term trials, like say a long-term phosphorus trial, because I think that's really important and an area that I feel like we're dropping the ball on a little bit at times. And so all of those things come together, right? And so if there's a specific system that we're looking at, say soil health, well, now we can go and look at that and say on the soil health side, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish within that system to improve yield? And what products would potentially fit within that? And how do we properly test that to understand the true efficacy of what we're seeing and the bottom line, right? Are we making more money by using these and the long-term effects of those types of treatments? So I would say generally what we really try to do is base our trials off of a system-based approach again, not a product-based approach. And then we bring in the products to be able to fit the system that we're trying to accomplish.
I got you covered. I got you covered on the products, buddy.
I know.
Biggest insights to date. I know it's like a newborn baby, but it's learning fast. What are your biggest insights from your research you've done?
Well, this is very broad, but I would say the base insights is that we need to question everything, because there's a lot of stuff that we've looked at and information that we've looked at, which is completely counteractive to what the standard recommendation would be in the industry. Say one that would, as an example, is generally in the industry when an agronomist or a retail is building a fertility recommendation for a customer with nitrogen, there's an estimated mineralization, the number that they try to use within that to understand what is the soil going to free up for nitrates for the crop to use this year. Now that number is generally throughout the industry based off of organic matter and a factor of organic matter. Well, through all of our work that we've done, there is no consistency to that number whatsoever. It doesn't seem, it seems like a very poor way actually to do it. So, things like that, right? Our nitrogen recommendations and how we've been doing them through the vast majority of Saskatchewan where I've worked, I don't, they're not accurate enough. I think we have the ability to do better. So we're taking a ground up approach on some of this stuff. And basically, and this is why I'm so skeptical at times, is relearning everything. Because we have the soil data and we have the ability to be able to dive headfirst into these types of things and really understand what's going on field scale with our customers.
When the rubber hits the road on that kind of thing, is it hard to affect change if you're going to be suggesting a bit of a 180 on traditional thinking?
It can be. It depends on what the change is. If it's just a
Oh,
change
so it
on how we,
depends. It depends.
it does, right? It does. You're going to catch that a lot. It's I got to almost catch myself or look up
That's
at
okay.
the
Just be yourself.
look up at
Just,
a thesaurus to see what depends. Another word for depends is, but it does, right? On the nitrogen side, on say recommendations and whatnot, that's easy. A guy's going to throw down urea or UAN or any of those types of products at a certain rate, and he's reliant on us to be able to give him the best recommendation possible. So generally, unless you're way out of whack on rates to what they've typically done, that actually is a fairly straightforward one. But where we're talking about leaving stubble higher or even implementing stripper stubbles or we're doing a lot of work on RTK and inter-row seeding and really fine placement of certain nutrients or even different types of say phosphorus products and those types of things. That's where it can get a little tricky, and that's where we need to bring data and trial work and be able to prove some of the thoughts that we have, because even in our minds we have these hypotheses where, okay, this should work based off of everything that we know. Well, let's prove it. We can't assume anything. We have to actually prove it in the field, because different crops, different environmental conditions, all of that stuff, even seeding implements and all that, they all affect what a potential return can be with the practice that you're trying to trial.
Being a numbers, mathematical guy, statistics, all that good stuff, what is required to actually formulate an answer that you trust?
Yeah, and it's tricky, right? Because there's the statistical significance, which can be a challenge to be able to have that in a large scale field setting. And we are doing a lot of statistics to understand the significance of what we're seeing. But also on our end, it's to do these trials over large enough acreage that it becomes more meaningful. Small plot works really good on testing if there's potentially an effect with that product, but small plot doesn't tease out the variability within those fields or how that product or that practice in its return varies depending if it's on a hilltop versus a low spot or a depression of the field. So the statistics is great, but a lot of the work that we're doing on the statistical side too is to be able to correlate differences that we see through different topographies within the field, if that makes sense. So that's where it gets tricky, but that's also where we're gaining a lot of insight, because there's specific, say, canola varieties that respond better to stresses than others, or don't respond as much, I guess you could almost say, right? There's less response to stresses. So we're seeing some varieties where on these hilltop locations where we don't have as much organic matter and base nutrients and water overall, that some varieties are doing better than others. But then that a lot of times will switch and flip in a low lying area, because those varieties that handle the stress better don't have the top end yield potential. And we can do that, and we can dissect these trials so much on absolutely everything that we do. And so the statistics comes into play, but if we have 8 or 10 or 12 or 14 of these trials over multi-years, and we're seeing a consistent 1.5 to 2 bushels, it isn't quite statistically significant, we can start feeling pretty confident about it still. But we've got to be very consistent with that and how we set up the trials and how we test for it.
We just had that discussion about how would you variable rate elemental sulfur in another geography, west of Lloydminster, Vermilion, Alberta. And you said it depends. You said it depends because there it's likely opposite, right? Because you could think about topography. Maybe, maybe in some circumstances you'd be pouring more on the high areas, and some places you'd be pulling back. You have different pHs in higher topography. You have different translocation of nutrients in soil types. It
Depending on
depends,
your long
Mike.
term,
It really depends.
it does. Based off of long-term cropping systems within those areas. If there's been lots of canola historically, and guys are applying lots of sulfur in those areas, they have a higher soil test value, right? Now you could say, well, soil test values for sulfur aren't overly consistent, and I would say that is true to a point. There's a lot of inconsistencies that you do see with sulfur, but when you're on a specific farm and you've got sulfur readings on 5 different zones within a field and 30 fields within that farm, and you're seeing all these consistent responses, well, then you get a pretty good idea on sulfur. So there is an ability to use a soil test for sulfur. So in our area, what we see with that is very low sulfur levels within the soil test. But in other areas, when I talk to other agronomists, they have high sulfur. And so how that responds to, say, your elemental sulfur application is different. On our hilltops, we have high pH. So there's additional benefits to, say, elemental sulfur in just short-term acidifying some of those zones. While in other areas, the hilltops are actually the lowest pH, right? So you got to be a little bit careful with acidity over time. All of those reasons and all of those factors just tell you why I am the way that I am.
Is that why variable rate has got such a bad rap? Because people are spreading it with a butter knife and you actually need a scalpel, and they're just not being geographically, contextually specific enough. And then it doesn't live up to expectations. Is that part of the issue?
I think that's part of the issue, is where they're making the recommendations from. And I think really what the issue is in those cases is that we're not learning from what we're recommending. We're not doing the data analysis after the fact to understand, okay, is that specific seeding rate or that sulfur rate, are we seeing a response to that? Because it's a lot of work, but it's important. Like, we need to be able to get feedback from the field on how our recommendations are working. I've seen lots of instances where we take over a customer and their seeding rates are way higher than what we would recommend because the person who is making the recommendations are from a wetter area, right? They might be from Eastern Saskatchewan, they might be by Red Deer or Edmonton. And so those seeding rates are applicable to their area, but all of our findings and all of our trial work would say that it's too high. There's a lot of assumptions, right? I recently was talking back and forth with a prof who's done a lot of work in the field with different seeding rates and whatnot, and I was asking him some questions with that, and he had mentioned to me that, well, this seeding rate with this application, you want to target 40 seeds per square foot. And my reply to that is, well, we don't target 40 with anything. And right, like, that's not what we see in our area with all the trials that we've done. But he insisted that 40 seeds is the best way to go. But has he done the work in our area?
Right.
He hasn't, right? So that's the trouble that we get into, is we're making these broad brush recommendations that encompasses large area and this wide geographic area, when we've got all these different subregions within it. Even within our trade area and our customer base that we have wide variability in environmental conditions, and that affects how we should recommend.
Will you always be working this system in West Central Saskatchewan, or do you see building a methodology that applies ubiquitously to every area if you go in and do the work, Mike?
Yeah, we haven't really put any time and effort into thinking about trying to go elsewhere or trying to help build this methodology to work with other agronomists. I think we definitely value collaboration, and we'd like to collaborate more with other agronomists throughout Western Canada. I think there's a lot of value to that, and I don't see as much of it as I'd like to see. But physically ourselves with our company, we are very much focused on West Central Saskatchewan and being just even more intensive within our area and being absolute experts on our area where we know almost everything that's going on, what pays and what doesn't. I think there's a lot of value on that. As soon as we spread ourselves out a little bit, well, do we lose some of that expertise?
I'll allow it. But hopefully long term, I'd love to see you all over Western Canada. What you're doing, Mike, I think you can help everybody to include. Can be inclusive.
Right. I'd say with that, we're always willing. This is, I guess, a shout out almost. I mean, we're always willing to work with other agronomists in other areas
Yeah,
and collaborate with them and be able to help them because they're
sure.
the experts in their area. And is there something that we're doing in the systems that we have that can help them?
Very
There's
good.
just so much opportunity within that, within even the agronomy networks that we're not using because the agriculture tends to be proud to a fault. And we've got to take that pride away a little bit.
Isn't the big opportunity for any agronomist on planet Earth the untreated acre or the uncoached acre?
Yeah, I suppose the challenge with that is the customer or the farmer in those cases has to be willing to listen and be willing to learn and be willing to adapt. So there's an uncoached acre, and yes, there's a lot of opportunity on those acres to be able to further production and make them more money, but are they willing to actually do it? And that's going to separate guys. Like it's almost an interview process when you pick up, say, another scouting acre on our side because they have to be willing, they have to be curious and creative, and we're not going to get crazy and tell them to completely change over their whole farm in 1 year to this different practice. We're going to do some trials. We're going to chip away. We're going to have reasons for doing what we're doing. That's part of the trial network is to be able to prove out some of that stuff. But if they're not willing to listen and they're not willing to change, there's no point.
Does your spidey sense improve on that over the years? You just sniff that out?
I would say generally it's not always perfect, but yeah, you can get a pretty good idea on a person after a meeting. Or, sometimes we'll invite some prospect customers to some of our meetings and just based off of their reaction to what we're presenting and some of our thoughts, we'll tell you whether they're worth, investing in on our side more. That the beauty of what we're doing in the agronomy consulting side is we don't have to work with everybody. We want to work with the farmers that are looking to do better and continually expand. And that's not always land based. It's just expand on their knowledge, expand on their production, profits, those types of things. Those are the people that we really want. We don't have to deal with every acre in an area.
How coachable do you think I am, like on a scale of 1 to 10? Just
Well, that's a very loaded question. I would say actually you're pretty good, Dan. You've done a lot of different things in this industry too, and a lot of self-reflection, which is always great. I think everybody should have that. So let's call you like I don't know. I'm not going to give you a 10, maybe like an 8.5. 8.5. What do you
wow,
think?
that's huge. I'm gonna get that embroidered on my
Eight and a
puffy
half out of 10.
vest. My puffy vest. 8.5. Mike, this is from Mike Palmier. I'm an 8.5 out of 10. Still working on the other point and a half.
I
Um,
nobody should ever be a 10. Let's be honest.
well, we could get into that. I could make various comments, but I'm not gonna because it's a family show. Um, when you start working with a customer, do you kind of see the ones and zeros in the matrix immediately as far as what you're going to modify here? Or the clay is already baked, or I can do this, or I can't. And where's the greatest ROI to start on?
Every farm is different. You don't really know that necessarily right off the bat. If you can, the first time that you start working with the farm, you'll try to get as much background information as possible, like what is their fertility rates and their crop rotation and all those types of things. And then you could pick out maybe a little things that you need to ask questions on, and at least test that they have a reason for doing what they're doing, which is important. Um, but that first year is very much a feeling out process. Unless somebody is doing something that is absolutely wrong, I like to just watch and comment on a little bit, set things up on some adjustments that we could make in the future. Maybe we do the odd trial here or there based off of what we're seeing. But I think it's really important to um, give respect to that customer and that farmer, that they do know what they're doing, that they're successful for a reason. And there's probably some things that we can learn based off of what they're doing as well. We don't want to go in just telling exactly what we know and that everything that anybody else does is wrong, because it's just not the case. So that first year is very much a feeling out process. It's year two where you really start going for
it. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from your customers?
Oh, yeah, you put me on the spot there a little bit. Um, so there's a specific area that we work in where they are very, very insistent that their wheat seed rate should be low. They have excessively low wheat seed rates. Everybody from anywhere else thinks they're nuts. And the more that I look at it, the more that I don't completely buy how low it is, but that there is a reason for why they're doing what they're doing, that there is some validity to it, and we need to better understand what their responses are in that specific area. And a lot of it off of what we're seeing is environment and heat. There seems to be microclimates in these specific areas that are affecting what our response is to a specific seed rate. So for us to go into that area and say, hey, we saw this study, small plot study from Indian Head, Saskatchewan, that says you need to seed at this rate. And now you're in West Central Saskatchewan, different soil type, different climate, different everything. But no, that'll just transfer over because they did it at Indian Head. And I've heard that, and that doesn't work. We need to really tease out the responses in all of these areas. And the more digging I do into this, and the more trials work that we do, the more that I am that skeptic that we've talked about. Because we just try to make all of these decisions easier, and I get it, because mental health is important. But on our side as agronomists, it's not about easy. It's about trying to be as right as you can, trying to increase the odds of success, because there's nothing that's ever fully 100% going to be right every year. That doesn't exist in this business because of the weather. So that's the most important thing that I see, is that to go into a farm and say that this one thing that he's doing is completely wrong isn't correct. You need to understand his reasoning for it. If they don't have a reason for it, well, then you can pick it apart. But they usually have a reason for doing what they're doing, and it's maybe we can learn from it.
Yeah. Reminds me of that McMahon and Yates theory that you were talking about there earlier. It's fascinating. What's in your toolbox, Mike, and why?
So you're talking about like platforms and
Yeah. Yeah.
data
What's
collection
in
and
your
stuff.
toolbox? What's in your big red toolbox?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work with SWOT maps with our variable rates. We do a lot of variable rate fertility and seed work. So it's been a huge part of our business, and that's really opened up a lot of avenues on the Max Insights side with the the field scale of research program. And just honestly understanding these responses through the field. It's been huge for us, and the change in mindset that we have. Another system that we're involved in that's been a big mindset shift for us has been crop intelligence with the soil moisture probes and weather stations. Just understanding what's going on at the subsoil depth with water, because it's been very limiting for us the last few years. And it just provides us more ammunition sometimes, because I see it every year, maybe even once a week when it's dry. I've seen industry people do it. I've seen farmers do it. You kick the soil, the top inch of soil, and there's no moisture in it. Oh, she's dry. Man, it's dry. We need a rain. It's like 1 inch of soil. Meanwhile, if we have healthy roots, we're going down we're going down to a meter at depth with our roots, but it's that 1 inch. And so I'll call people out on that. Like, don't do that. I've seen industry people do it. And it's like, all you're trying to do is build up this thought that everything's close to ruin, that we are that close to complete and utter failure. And why do that? It's easy enough to go there on our own. Why do we need somebody like coaching us to think the same way? Right. So I guess it's another side is, optimism. is really important. When you talked about hiring people, I mean, optimism, being optimistic, I think is important because I couldn't imagine being a pessimist working with farmers every day and the challenges that they face. Right? There's a reason why a lot of farmers are naturally pessimistic, is because a lot of stuff happens to them that's out of their control, and we get that. But on our side, we're part-time shrinks in this business, and we need to be optimistic and be able to work with them to always have the bigger picture in mind. So anyways, that was an aside. As far as other tools go, we do a lot of work with tracking applications, and that's also important on the Max Insight side. So do a lot of work with Climate Field View, JD Op Center, some different platforms that we'll use for satellite imagery. And we're also doing a little bit of work on our own as far as trying to build a bit of an internal database to be able to build actionable decisions and insights of our own based off of the data that we are pulling.
How do you see disseminating this information, sharing this, collaborating with your tribe? How will you get this across to the folks that are farming?
I mean, it's easy, obviously, to our customers because we share everything to them. We have two large meetings every winter. One's a trial meeting, one's just a general agronomy meeting, and we're an open book on all this stuff. As far as the general population goes, right now, we don't advertise, we don't market, we don't do any of that stuff because we haven't had to. And so really what we're reliant on right now to share that message is just word of mouth and referral business from our customers to their neighbors. So that's maybe something that we need to shift in the future because we want to build the wealth of all of West Central Saskatchewan, right? That's part of our mission. And right now, I wouldn't say that we're actively doing that because our growth has happened so quickly that we're basically just trying to make sure that we do a good job of servicing what we already have.
Maybe you guys could do some like webinars and podcasts and stuff and put it on the internet.
Good. Yeah. I'll have to talk to somebody who knows something about that.
What do you see? What do you see as some of the more consistent habits of successful farmers that you see as patterns?
Attention to detail is big. And that's, again, a very open-ended comment. I would say that attention to detail requires those successful farms to understand what they don't do well and what they do well. And that's probably the most important thing out of all these farms. And that's why we have a business, honestly, is to expect a decent sized farmer to be an expert on mechanics and finance and accounting and agronomy and grain marketing and HR, all those things, it's impossible. And so for them to realize again, the 80-20 rule, what they're good at, how they can accelerate their business and what their unique ability is versus what they can hire out, I think is really important. Letting go of some of that control, because that's been a source of pride for Western Canadian farms for a long time, is that they can do everything. But realistically, people can only do so much. And if you want to do a really good job at everything, it can't just be you. And that's a lesson for us too, right? And for myself and for you, Dan, right? Rely on the people around you. And so I think that is honestly the number one. I think going forward over the next 5-10 years, I think mindset and perspective is honestly going to be a game changer. And I've heard other people say it, and I completely agree. Because still in farming and in agriculture period, we tend to think too short term. And we need to have a bit of a long-term growth mindset within what we're doing. Obviously, we don't want to go broke in the meantime. That's really important. Because if you go broke, it doesn't matter how long-term you've got. But there's a lot of opportunity within the ag sector to think a little bit bigger and to think more long-term that will provide us a lot of benefits going forward that we need to consider.
On the topic of products, you tend to think in systems. Why do you prefer to think in systems over products?
Because systems will narrow in which products will work the best and where. Right? If I go to you, Dan, and say, well, where does this product fit that you sell? Where does it fit the best on my farm? A lot of salespeople will say, well, it fits everywhere. And that's just not true. There's very few things that absolutely fit everywhere. And even if they do have a fit everywhere, it's at different application methods and timings and those types of things. Um, so in order for us to really narrow in and try to increase the chances of success, we can't be product based. We've got to be system based. We've got to understand what we're looking for, what we're trying to accomplish, and then bring the product in through that, especially with fertility. And I think that's really important because otherwise there's 50 products that are out there which work all the time, always win all their trials, work everywhere. How do you narrow that in?
Well, that's your job with your trial method there, with your
Yeah,
skeptic's
we
eye and
can't
your
even
tools, and you know.
we can't trial them all, right? We got to have a
No.
starting point somewhere. And the way that we think that we need to do it is to be able to filter them initially based off of what we're trying to do. Like what's our end goal?
Are you prepared if it starts raining?
I hope so. We're not used to it, but I really think we are. And that's again a big benefit to have an agronomic consultant on your farm is we are part-time shrinks. I mentioned that before, and we need to make sure that our customers are able to take advantage of any type of situation. And so if we get a lot of rain, I don't want to give up a single bushel. How do we manage that after 3 really dry years? And that's the key. We've got to continue to plan for success. We don't have to throw out the nitrogen rates that we did going into 2021 because we've built up a whole pile in the soil. But you don't know that unless you sample, and you sample vigorously through that entire field in different areas. So we need to manage costs. We need to be efficient with the dollars that we spend, but at the same time maximize revenue. And that's the challenge. But that's what makes this fun.
It is a fun puzzle, is it not? Um, you recently traveled to France.
Yeah, I had a really good travel buddy.
Highly renowned, highly, available. Like, folks are looking for a referral. You could refer for him to travel. Great travel. Makes any trip better. A lot of ways, a lot of context. But what was your perspective traveling to the northwest coast of France to experience the location of Team X headquarters where the founder started out? Like, tell us that story.
Right. So we went on invite from TMAC Agro to better understand their products, where they came from, where the fit is, have really good open discussions on where the opportunity is for them and with our customers. And so it is really interesting because we went on a train from Paris to St. Malo is where we were. And there's a bunch of rapeseed out there and it's all starting to flower and it doesn't look that good for having 30 inches of rain per year. It doesn't look as good as you would think. And the trees aren't even budded out yet. Like the whole thing is a bit bizarre, right? It doesn't necessarily, I have a hard time, right? But it also gave me spring fever. Like I want the seeding to start here tomorrow. But I I think that they've got a really interesting story because they're taking seashells basically and calcium from the bottom of oceans to be able to recycle and use them with their products to help farmers grow more grain and to be cost effective. So I think all that's really interesting. That sustainability theme is important. I think it's going to be more and more important as we go through, right? Um, so then, I mean, again, on our side, it's just to understand where's the best fit for what they're doing because there is a fit. Where is the best fit? How do we understand these products and their responses and where we can maximize with what they do, right? I mean, they're pulling seaweed off the bottom of oceans too, right? And so seaweed isn't anything new within agriculture, seaweed and kelp and all that type of stuff, but how they formulate that and how they mix it in with their biostimulant products potentially is, right? So I think it opened up my mind to the possibilities, which is all that I need, right? And after that, it's okay. Let's try to really narrow this in and figure out where to go with it and go from there.
What did you think of all the technology that they brought to bear? And they share with us a lot of their patented technology and talked about top phos, how it's more available and things like that. What kind of impression does
Well,
that have on a skeptic?
the fact that they're proving it is important, right? They're proving what some of their claims. They're using it in the lab, right? And they're showing like showing the roots on that one setup was really nice to see, right? That they are having an effect on that plant architecture. So I think all of that is really important. I mean, that's one of the filters that we have on as for us with testing products is is the company doing research work? Are they trying to better understand their product in Western Canadian agriculture? Are they working with the Agronomy sites or smaller um, small plot research companies and that kind of stuff? Because if they're not willing to do that kind of work and to be able to really understand what their product is doing and where the best fit is, it's pretty tough to do the work for them on our side. And I'm not sure I'm willing to do that. Like there's got to be a starting point. And so that again, they're doing that work in their own research facilities and their own labs. They're doing that work across the world. I know they're actively involved with a number of Agronomy sites within Saskatchewan, and all that stuff matters. Like it just gives you right off the bat a feeling of, okay, there's a bit of trust here. Let's figure out where to go from here, right?
Well, I really appreciate TMAC Agro taking us to France and sponsoring this episode. And you never know, maybe they'll invest in some research at Max Insights one day.
We're always open and available. Got a lot of ideas.
Mario, but isn't that? Thanks, Mario, and thanks, Luke, and the whole team there. And it was really interesting. I found too to meet some of the top brass there. Some of the really passionate, intellectual thinkers that just eat, breathe, and sleep all of that science, and so it was fun. But um, isn't that a fundamental issue for agronomists that you spend a large percentage of your time talking to producers who come to you and say, "Well, I decided to use product XYZ because salesman ABC said from
Yeah.
company MNOP that it's really good, and why are you using it? Well, I don't know. It just hasn't our industry been sullied by that hizzle jizzle juice as we affectionately referred to it
You
in the
affectionately refer to it.
everybody seemed to
Um,
like it. Yeah.
I mean, I would say that it's like that in a number of sectors within farming and agriculture, right? I mean, we've seen on the variable rate side too. Um, but you're right. I mean, it does feel like a lot of times we're chasing, and I don't want to feel like I'm overly skeptical right off the bat, but we do have to be to a point because there's there's a lot of salespeople, a lot of people out there who are pushing products that are that they don't really understand the context necessarily that they're selling these within, or where else that money could be spent on the farm. And so it's up to us to really try to disseminate that because our customers could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on these products that always win trials, no matter what, based off of the sell sheets that they're handed. And they're cheaper, work better, put less down. How many times have I heard that? Lots of times. And so we need to protect customers. Like we have to protect them. Like we are that filter and we have to be the gatekeeper for this. Because otherwise there's a lot of money that could be spent on something that's just not proven and not in the right area, not on the right field, on the right soil type. There's so many factors that are involved. And so, yes, our customers will use some of these products. I try to talk them down and to do trials and to do very
Yeah.
um, but we really try to funnel it as much through us because we feel like we need to protect our customers and their bottom lines and their expenditures.
What was your experience going to the beaches of Normandy and seeing where, you know, our tribe first came to liberate France? What did you experience there, Mike?
Well, it honestly just tells me a little bit of how soft we've become because you think to yourself, can I do all of the things that these people did? Like, is that possible? Right? Do we have the mental fortitude to be able to do what those tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people did? Right? I mean, they're landing on the beaches of Omaha Beach, and 90% of the people on the first run are all mowed down and lying in the water floating around. Do we have the fortitude to be able to keep going, to push through?
Yeah.
And so I hope we do. Um, because that's not only for battle, that's for starting businesses and adding value to our customers and our families and our areas. But that honestly, that's what goes through my mind more often than anything. We've had life really easy. As much as we think our life is hard sometimes, it's so much easier than it was 80 years ago. And so that perspective, I think, is again really important. We tend to think about the world and, oh, my life is so hard. I have to go to this grocery store to pick up my apples, right? I mean, did you have apples in December? No, because you had to ship them from other places. It's just that perspective that I feel at times we're maybe losing, but it's so important to keep that on on how good our life is and how our lives are getting better. But what can we do to give back? It's not all about us. And that's what those soldiers did, is they gave their lives, and they gave in many cases 6, 7, 8 years of their lives to go and fight for their country. Are we willing to do that?
You're a well-read dude, and you enjoy history and a bit of a philosopher like myself. I think maybe that's why we get along and seem so smart to other people when we're in their company. Um, who would you most like to talk to in history if you get a chance? Besides me, like because we already did that. We were in France together.
I don't know. I haven't honestly thought about that question too much. I'm honestly thinking about agriculture right off the bat, and so like Norman Borlaug, guys like that. They're real pioneers, like Seeger Wheeler. Get an idea, because everything that they did and the advances that they made in our agriculture systems were huge for the limited amount of technology that they had. So there's a lot of insights that, if we're just solely reliant on technology all the time, do we lose some of that, like those innate insights that we have as people, as humans?
Well, and that is a very interesting juxtaposition too. If you could speak to, forgive me if I get this wrong, but and there's a book I'm thinking of too. Jake Legui recommended it to me, but it's essentially, you juxtapose Norman Borlaug's Green Revolution against, I think it was Malthus's theory that, you know, systems in nature will always degrade and sort of consume themselves. And,
Right.
it's abundance versus scarcity. And in the end, I think hopefully it's been shown that abundance is one, and that's a lesson for life. I really believe in that. So that would be an interesting conversation, an interesting debate, and especially in the context of 2024. And as bad as things are, didn't things ultimately get much better? And peak oil and peak FOSS and peak everything else hasn't happened yet. And I still leave the lights on because I believe in there's a lot of energy out there, man. Did you know that France has 60 nuclear reactors and they get a
I
lot
did
of their
not know
uranium
that.
from
I did not
Europe?
know that,
Yeah.
but it makes sense. It makes sense.
I was
I
studying some
Yeah.
geopolitics when we got back, and yeah, very interesting topics for discussion there in the future. Um, where if we have this conversation again 3 years from now, Mike, on the Growing the Future podcast, again sponsored by TMAC Agro, just for a much larger number, um, because it's shown has grown in popularity since you came on. Um, what has to be true for Mike Palmier to be satisfied, even though it seems like you're never satisfied?
I just think we need to continue to see progress and to be able to have those incremental improvements year over year and continually learn and get better at what we do. Um, I think that's the most important thing. There's nothing more frustrating to me, and this is honestly why we've went this route, is in 2020, that was my first crop year as Max Ag. We had generally quite good weather conditions, and we had good yields, and we set up all sorts of trials and all sorts of things that we wanted to learn, and we didn't learn anything because we weren't tracking it properly. We weren't doing, accessing yield maps and being consistent enough. And there's nothing more frustrating than going through a good year where you could have learned so many insights and not. And so that's what I hope is, in 24, we have a real banger of a crop, have really wonderful crops. And we are set up now to learn so much more than we've ever been set up for. And so that, in 3, 4 years, we are just light years ahead on our recommendations and our mindsets within our area because of the work that we've done to set ourselves up. And that's the most important thing. I talk a lot about incremental improvements and just consistently getting better. And it's really, really important in the work that we do.
One thing that I wanted people to know about you, because I'm very proud of you and I'm very proud to be your friend, is how hard you work. And you work a lot. And you told me how, you're working when most people are sleeping, you know. Tell us about your work ethic, your drive, and your passion for working when the kids go to bed. And I think it's significant.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like to
Now
talk.
you're a humble guy, come on, but
Yeah.
work ethic's a
I mean,
thing. You're getting ahead.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, what we want to do is be able to see progress and to affect change and to be influencers in our area. And so that doesn't just shut off at 5 o'clock. If there's more work to be done and we can gain some insight and knowledge and just continue to move ahead with working a little harder for our customers, then I'm always willing to do that. It's not just a job for me. It's it's a it has a lot of meaning, and we want to do the best jobs that we absolutely can for our customers and for West Central Saskatchewan. And so when you have a large inner meaning like that, it doesn't even feel like work. Like this is exciting, this is fun, like this challenging all the time. And so that's, I guess, where there's a difference. I'm not going to say that everybody in my family appreciates my work ethic all the time, and something that I'm definitely working on. But it's like I've said to my wife sometimes. People go home and they have their hobbies. So they have their work and they have their hobbies. It just so happens to my hobby is the exact same as my work.
Well, you're good at it, and I think that makes a huge difference. And I love that you have a really big why, and it's probably why maybe you didn't have a huge overarching, business plan with, 20 stick people in it around the boardroom table. Said one stick person.
Is that what your initial business plan was? I'd
Yeah, I
love to see
had
that.
I had hundreds of stick people. I was a big CEO. No, it is a byproduct of being passionate about wanting to do something. If you have endless curiosity and you want to know more about, Simon Garfunkel theory or whatever you talked about earlier. I can't remember what the names are there.
That is a better name, by the way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The Lennon McCartney um resonance factor. Yeah. You think you know everything, but you quickly realize the more that you know, the less that you know about what you knew before when you want to know more. So on that really wise note, people will be deciphering that for a very long time. Maybe artificial intelligence will figure out what I just said there in future generations of OpenAI. But anyways, it's been such a blast. Like I don't know how many times we got a good chance to interact since I first met you. I don't know, a year or two ago. But
Yeah, a little over a year ago. It's flown by. It's crazy.
it's crazy. Yeah, we did a webinar together. Um, you hung out at the Convergence conference. You brought some folks to the Convergence conference. We've talked about doing trials together. For someone like myself trying to bring products to the market, you're absolutely a bellwether and a canary in the coal mine. Not that I want you to, pass away from any noxious gas, fatal gases or anything in the, don't take me literally there, but I think it's important to have skeptics on board for us to do what we're going to do. And it's tough to recognize maybe for products, they don't always work everywhere, but we have to be mindful of that and apply the skeptic science. So I think you're doing awesome work in agronomy in West Central Saskatchewan. That's why I'm encouraging you to do more because I'd love to see, your model of thinking to go everywhere, and I'm sure, in some ways it will via this podcast. But yeah, I really look forward to continuing to work with you and our friendship and our collaboration. And I'm so excited to see what your business scale to. And frankly, I'm really excited that producers have the opportunity to work with folks like you because I think it's pretty lonely and difficult otherwise. And if you have someone on your team like a Mike Palmier and his team, that's got to make a big difference in your life, in your mental health, and your business strategy. Because I think you guys really help folks, don't you? I mean, I'm sure you experience that, right?
Well, I like to see if we have customers that are expanding their operation and picking up land. I'd like to think that we're helping to enable them to do that because they can think to themselves, well, I know I have the agronomy covered, right? So I know I have that covered. I can expand and feel comfortable that my agronomy is taken care of. Now I just have to worry about these other things. And if we can do that, then we're coming along, right? And so that's something that we're interested in doing. It's just to enable our customers and to give them that peace of mind, like you had said. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I really think that's an interesting idea concept if you can free up, some of your psychic energy elsewhere to make decisions. Because I mean, theoretically, we all think that there's a little accountant inside of us, keeping track of how much energy we have for decisions, whether that's true or not. I mean, that's common theory. Talked about that in my expectations speech at Convergence. But yeah, if you can help folks figure this part out, I mean, then they're on to other, really challenging management puzzles. And farming has just got to be an endless puzzle that folks like you can help illuminate the way. So keep up the good work, man. I can't wait to see all what you're going to achieve in the coming years and some of the interesting insights. And I think we're going to continue to talk about it too. We've talked about different formats to share your message. And we talked about, for example, doing like a variable rate webinar. Although you insisted that we need to have folks from other areas to provide their perspective because you couldn't do any blanket application because that would be wrong. But I appreciate that perspective. It's realistic. It's frustrating. I wish one size fit all in something in farming would make it easier. But you're
Make
right.
life easier.
But
Yeah.
you're right.
Well, that's good. I'm I'm glad you recorded that you just said it was right. So that's going to be really helpful for later.
I can edit that out, no problem. I can pay people to edit that out. It's not a big deal. We don't want to go that far. But anyways, no, I'm proud of you, man. It has been really fun hanging with you. Love you lots, and you're somebody to look up to in my life. I really respect you, brother.
Yeah, well, that's great. I appreciate you saying that. I don't know if I'm worthy of that, but I definitely work towards being more and more worthy all the time. And it's pretty neat to see where say our relationship has come. And I mean, that's just through networking. Like I talk a lot with our staff about networking, getting yourself out there, talk to people. You just think about the opportunities that have come, say, both of our ways, just from saying hi to each other at a meeting in Dodsland of all places, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's really neat about this industry, because that those relationships will carry on for the rest of our careers. So
Yeah, if you just keep looking for the opportunities, it turned into a trip to France together heterosexually, and yeah, a lot of it was great memories. It was really good, and I'm glad that we brought you along to give T-Mac a hard time. It was a lot of fun. I think they really appreciated your input, and I'm sure we'll be working more with them. And I think it's a great company. It's pretty interesting to see something that 65 years ago, fishermen were bringing rocks up on the shore and turned into a $4 billion company with 10,000 employees. And we got to see some of that magic, and maybe you'll get to test the theory on your plots. Who knows?
yeah, no, that sounds excellent. I'm definitely looking forward to trying at some point.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Perfect. Thanks again, Dan.